Let's begin. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth. Julian Cross leaned back in his chair at the elite rooftop restaurant, a low, confident laugh spilling from his lips as the city lights shimmered beneath him. Beside him sat Serena Vale, flawless and radiant, her manicured hand resting lightly on his arm as if she belonged there by right. From this height, the world felt small, controllable, exactly the way Julian liked it. He believed he had finally won. His wealth was untouched, his reputation polished clean, and the inconvenient chapter of his past neatly erased. He joked about destiny and consequences as if they were fairy tales meant for weaker men. Somewhere in his mind flickered the memory of his pregnant wife, sent away months ago with cold efficiency. He had been certain she would fade into silence, another problem solved with money and pressure. Serena laughed along, feeding his ego with soft praises, reminding him of his influence, his dominance, his ability to bend outcomes to his will. With her admiration, Julian felt invincible. He thought about how effortlessly he had shaped the truth. A few strategic calls, discreet payments, carefully planted stories, and the world had accepted his version of events. Media outlets praised his business genius. Social circles closed ranks around him. No one questioned what he had destroyed to protect himself. The restaurant buzzed with power, occupied by investors, politicians, and executives who nodded respectfully as Julian raised his glass. He toasted to freedom, to success, to a future unburdened by weakness. To him, love had always been a transaction, and he was convinced he had settled the most troublesome account of his life. What Julian didn't realize was that fate rarely announces itself politely. As his laughter grew louder, something in the air shifted. The rhythm of conversation around him faltered, cut short by an uneasy silence. The maitre d' froze mid-step. Chairs stopped scraping. Julian felt the change before he understood it, a subtle tightening in his chest. He dismissed the sensation with a smirk, assuming someone had recognized him, another admirer drawn to his status. He was wrong. Very, terribly wrong. Julian's marriage to Elena Cross had not begun in darkness. Elena had entered his world with warmth, independence, and quiet ambition, a woman who carried herself with dignity earned through struggle, not inheritance. She had built her confidence without shortcuts, and at first Julian admired that strength, mistaking it for something he could possess rather than respect. Over time, admiration curdled into insecurity, and insecurity into control. What had once felt like a partnership slowly became a hierarchy. Julian decided where money went, who Elena could meet, and which parts of her life deserved approval. Her calendar revolved around his convenience, her opinions filtered through his moods. Elena tried to keep peace, believing compromise was love, even as her voice grew softer and his authority grew heavier. She told herself marriage required endurance. When Elena discovered she was pregnant, hope returned. She imagined the child might soften Julian, awaken empathy, or remind him that love required care. Instead, the pregnancy exposed the cold truth she had avoided. Julian saw the baby as an inconvenience, a visible weakness that could complicate his image and restrict his freedom. His patience vanished, replaced by irritation and emotional distance. It was during this fragile time that Serena Vale appeared, effortless and admiring, offering praise without boundaries or expectations. Serena asked nothing of Julian except presents and gifts, and that made her easy. Compared to Elena's quiet strength, Serena felt uncomplicated, obedient, disposable. Julian didn't hesitate. When Elena uncovered the affair, Julian didn't apologize or deny it. He spoke with entitlement, reminding her of the lifestyle he had provided, insisting gratitude should outweigh betrayal. He framed his infidelity as inevitability, her pain as inconvenience. When Elena refused to accept humiliation as the price of marriage, Julian moved quickly and strategically. He cut financial support, ensured friends distanced themselves, and filed for divorce while she was still carrying his child. The process was cold, efficient, merciless. Elena walked away with dignity intact but heart deeply wounded, carrying scars that money, apologies, or time could not immediately erase. Those scars followed her into sleepless nights, silent tears, and uncertain mornings, yet they also planted resilience, teaching her that survival was possible even when love failed, trust shattered, and the person she once believed in chose power over compassion without ever looking back, despite carrying a future within her and fear pressing heavily on her heart daily. After the separation, Elena faced a reality far harsher than she had imagined. She was pregnant, abandoned, and emotionally fractured, carrying both grief and fear inside her. Julian's influence moved silently but efficiently through the city. Job interviews were suddenly cancelled. Phone calls went unanswered. Former friends offered polite distance instead of support, as if her pain were contagious. Every door that once felt accessible closed without explanation, leaving Elena isolated and struggling to understand how quickly a life could unravel. Still, she refused to beg. Pride and survival pushed her forward when despair threatened to pull her under. Elena rented a modest apartment on the edge of the city, far from the world she once shared with Julian. The space was small, quiet, and lonely, but it was hers. She learned to stretch limited savings, count every expense, and live carefully. More than anything, she focused on protecting the life growing inside her, reminding herself that her strength now mattered for two. Nights were the hardest. Anxiety crept in with the darkness, bringing doubts about the future, money, and loneliness. She cried silently, hands resting over her belly, whispering promises she hoped she could keep. In those moments, fear mixed with determination. Elena vowed her child would never be raised on lies, manipulation, or cruelty. Whatever she lacked in wealth, she would replace with honesty and resilience. She attended prenatal appointments alone, sitting in waiting rooms filled with couples and families. Curious glances and quiet whispers followed her, but she learned not to flinch. Each visit reminded her that endurance was no longer optional. Slowly, routines formed. She read, planned, and educated herself, rebuilding confidence piece by piece. What Julian never saw was the transformation happening beyond his reach. Beneath exhaustion and uncertainty, Elena was growing steadier, calmer, and wiser. She was not merely surviving abandonment. She was preparing, patiently and quietly, for a future that would no longer be defined by loss, but by strength, purpose, and a resolve powerful enough to outgrow the pain that once threatened to destroy her completely. With each passing day, she learned self-trust, accepted solitude, and embraced responsibility, understanding that rebuilding life required patience, discipline, courage, and belief in herself. Even when exhaustion lingered, hope felt distant, and the road ahead appeared long, uncertain, and unforgiving, yet she continued forward for her child and her own survival with quiet determination and strength. Adrian Blackwood was a name spoken with quiet respect in global business circles, a man whose influence came not from noise but from consistency, ethics, and an unshakable sense of purpose. He never needed grand gestures or public displays of power. His authority rested in the way rooms listened when he spoke and how decisions shifted simply because he was present. To many, he was formidable. To those who worked closely with him, he was precise, disciplined, and deeply principled. Adrian met Elena through a legal consultancy connected to a non-profit initiative that supported displaced and marginalized women. Elena had volunteered her expertise, hoping to rebuild professional credibility while helping others. During one meeting, Adrian noticed her immediately, not for dramatic reasons, but for her composure. She spoke with clarity, asked thoughtful questions, and carried herself with a calm strength that did not seek attention. Unlike Julian, Adrian listened without interrupting, without judging, without asserting dominance. Their conversations unfolded naturally over time. There were no transactions, no expectations hidden beneath favors. Adrian offered guidance when asked, mentorship when needed, and support that came without conditions. He never treated Elena as fragile or damaged by her past. He recognized resilience where others saw vulnerability. To him, Elena was capable, intelligent, and quietly formidable. As trust grew, so did mutual respect. Adrian learned about her past, the betrayal, the pregnancy, and the strength it took to stand alone. He admired her not despite her struggles, but because of how she faced them. Elena, in turn, found safety in being heard rather than controlled. There was no rush, no pressure, only understanding. Over time, Adrian became an ally and a protector, not because Elena needed rescuing, but because he believed in standing beside people who had earned their ground. When he invited her to attend a high-profile business dinner, Elena hesitated. The world Adrian inhabited was dangerously close to the one she had escaped. She agreed only after reassurance, with no intention of revisiting her past or confronting Julian. What neither of them anticipated was how fate would quietly arrange a collision, proving that some encounters are not accidents, but delayed reckonings waiting for the right moment to surface. Back in the restaurant, Julian's laughter died mid-breath, the sound cutting off as if someone had pulled the air from his lungs. His glass hovered inches from his lips when an unfamiliar weight pressed against his chest. Instinctively, he turned toward the entrance, irritation already forming, ready to dismiss whatever interruption dared break his moment. Then he saw her. Elena stood beneath the soft golden lights, visibly pregnant, her posture calm and assured. She looked radiant, not in a fragile way, but in a way that spoke of survival and self-respect. Beside her stood Adrian Blackwood. His presence alone altered the room. Conversations dissolved into whispers, phones were discreetly lowered, and heads turned with unmistakable curiosity. The maitre d' straightened instantly, staff moving with sudden urgency. Power had entered the room, and everyone felt it. Julian's world tilted violently. For a moment, the restaurant blurred, sounds fading into a dull echo. This was not how it was supposed to be. Elena was meant to vanish quietly, fade into irrelevance. Instead, she stood taller than ever, walking forward with measured grace, unbothered by the attention surrounding her. Each step she took felt deliberate, confident, final. Her eyes met Julian's briefly. There was no anger there, no accusation, no bitterness. Only indifference. That single look struck deeper than rage ever could. It told him she no longer needed anything from him, not answers, not apologies, not validation. He felt smaller under that gaze than he ever had under criticism. Serena noticed the shift immediately. Her polished smile tightened, eyes darting between Julian and the pair approaching. Something fundamental had changed, and she could feel it. This was not a woman defeated by abandonment, nor a man seeking approval. Adrian pulled out Elena's chair with natural ease, his gesture respectful and unperformative, the kind Julian had never bothered to offer. Julian pushed his chair back, attempting to stand, but his confidence fractured under the weight of the moment. Words refused to form. His rehearsed narratives crumbled silently as he realized the truth with brutal clarity. Elena hadn't disappeared. She hadn't been destroyed by his rejection or buried by his influence. She had risen. And in doing so, she had stepped into a world far beyond his control, leaving him exposed, frozen, and surrounded by the quiet understanding that power shifts when dignity replaces fear, and silence speaks louder than laughter ever could. Adrian moved through the restaurant with effortless composure, greeting influential guests as though the evening belonged to him. Executives, investors, and political figures straightened when he approached, offering respect without hesitation. When he introduced Elena, he did not mention her past or her losses. He spoke of her as a partner in a philanthropic expansion project, a woman whose insight and leadership were shaping meaningful change. A ripple of gasps and murmurs spread across the room, quiet but unmistakable. Julian's name faded from conversations as attention shifted elsewhere. Serena felt the change before she understood it. The admiration she once enjoyed suddenly felt thin, borrowed, fragile. Watching Elena seated confidently beside Adrian forced an uncomfortable realization upon her. There was a difference between standing next to power and possessing it. Julian's influence, once impressive, now seemed loud and hollow under Adrian's calm authority. As discussions drifted toward ethics, transparency, and responsible leadership, Julian found himself subtly excluded. Invitations passed him by. Questions were directed elsewhere. The stories he had carefully constructed about himself began to unravel under unspoken scrutiny. His reputation, built on manipulation and control, felt dangerously exposed without anyone needing to accuse him openly. Elena remained silent throughout it all. She listened, nodded, and contributed only when necessary, never glancing Julian's way. Her silence carried more weight than confrontation ever could. It told the room she had nothing to prove and no wounds left to defend. Each composed breath she took reinforced that she belonged there on her own merit. Julian watched helplessly as his world rearranged itself without him at the center. The laughter, the admiration, the certainty he once enjoyed slipped through his grasp. In that moment, the truth settled heavily within him. He hadn't simply lost a wife or a future he took for granted. He had underestimated her resilience, her intelligence, and her ability to rise beyond the damage he inflicted. That miscalculation would cost him far more than pride. It would follow him long after the evening ended, leaving him alone with the understanding that power earned through dignity lasts longer than power stolen through control. He felt eyes measuring him, not with admiration but assessment, as if his worth were being recalculated in real time. Every polite smile felt colder, every nod more distant. The room no longer bent around his presence. It moved forward without him. For the first time, Julian understood exposure without attack, defeat without confrontation. The silence surrounding him was not empty. It was condemning, final, and impossible to negotiate, marking the moment he ceased to matter. That realization lingered, heavy and irreversible, long after voices returned and music resumed, sealing his quiet unraveling in plain sight alone. Rumors began to spread like wildfire, subtle at first but gaining momentum with every whispered conversation and sideways glance. High-profile investors who had once praised Julian now exchanged uncertain looks when his name came up, questioning past decisions and scrutinizing the deals he had made with renewed skepticism. The meticulously crafted image of the untouchable billionaire began to show cracks, tiny fissures that hinted at instability. Even outside the restaurant, murmurs of lawsuits, ethical missteps, and questionable business practices started circulating, forcing legal teams to revisit decisions Julian had long assumed were settled. Adrian never needed to intervene directly. Truth had a way of surfacing on its own, unstoppable and relentless, like water eroding stone. Julian, sensing the shift, decided to confront Elena privately. The encounter was arranged under the guise of civility, yet it carried the weight of a reckoning he had long avoided. Julian's voice carried a mixture of arrogance and attempted remorse, his words carefully chosen to seem sincere, yet lacking the depth only genuine acknowledgement could bring. "Elena," he began, hesitating briefly as if he'd forgotten how to speak without commanding, but she held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. She didn't need to interrupt, her calm presence did the work for her. She listened without flinching, absorbing his words like a mirror that reflected not pride or guilt, but truth. When he finished, she responded softly but firmly, her tone steady. "Forgiveness does not require reconciliation. You don't get to dictate how I move forward. You cannot reclaim what you chose to destroy." Her words were measured, precise, and cutting, yet without malice. Julian felt a pang, not of anger, but of helplessness, a sensation foreign to a man accustomed to controlling outcomes. Serena, who had watched the unraveling from the periphery, finally understood her own role. She was never chosen, never the person Julian respected or valued. She had been a tool, a temporary fixture in a world designed to feed his ego. With quiet dignity, she walked away, leaving behind the illusions of grandeur she had once shared, a subtle acknowledgement of her own awakening. Julian remained, alone, staring at the aftermath of his actions. He was surrounded by silence, yet it roared with the consequences of his choices. No ally, no manipulation, no wealth could fill the void left by trust broken, respect lost, and opportunity wasted. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the arrogance, the miscalculation of Elena's strength, pressed on him inescapably. Alone in his carefully constructed world, Julian finally understood the cost of power misused and pride unchecked. The very foundations he had built his life upon seemed to tremble as he realized that his empire, though vast, could not shelter him from the truths he had spent years trying to bury. Every glance he remembered, every laugh he had shared at her expense, now echoed with consequences he could not undo, leaving him with a stark, painful clarity. He was alone, and it was entirely his own doing. Elena felt the weight of the past, but she refused to let it dictate her future. Every temptation to retaliate against Julian, to humiliate him publicly or seek some petty satisfaction, was met with a quiet, deliberate refusal. She understood that revenge could never repair what had been broken, nor could it provide the stability and peace she now sought for herself and her child. Instead, she chose dignity, focusing on what truly mattered, the life growing inside her, her professional goals, and the path she was forging for the future. Each decision she made was measured, intentional, and free from the shadow of anger. Adrian remained at her side, but never in a position of control. He did not speak for her or decide her course. He supported, guided, and respected her autonomy. When he offered advice, Elena considered it with clarity, knowing she had the final word. Their partnership was rooted in mutual respect, built on recognition of her strength and the wisdom she had earned through hardship. Adrian admired her resilience and self-determination, and she valued his steadiness and integrity without ever feeling diminished. Together, they moved forward not as savior and rescued, but as equals pursuing shared goals while honoring each other's independence. Elena's focus on her child gave her purpose, grounding her decisions in responsibility rather than emotion. Her work, too, became a source of empowerment. Each meeting she attended, each project she completed, reinforced her sense of capability and her belief in the value of earned success. She did not need to prove herself to Julian, to Serena, or to anyone else. Her achievements stood as testimony to her strength, resilience, and intelligence. By choosing peace over vengeance, Elena became untouchable in a way Julian could never comprehend. He had once wielded power through control and intimidation, but she now possessed an inner authority he could not influence. Her life was no longer defined by his choices or his failures. It was defined by her own courage, her own wisdom, and her unwavering commitment to what truly mattered. In that quiet triumph, Elena discovered the most profound victory, the ability to rise above bitterness, to safeguard her child, and to shape a future that belonged entirely to her, untethered by past betrayals and fortified by self-respect. The day Elena went into labor, sunlight streamed softly through the hospital windows, filling the room with a quiet warmth. She held her own hand firmly, breathing steadily, grounded in the calm she had cultivated over months of preparation and resilience. When her child arrived, the world seemed to pause, every moment distilled into the pure, overwhelming presence of life. The baby's first cries resonated through the room, a sound that felt like both an ending and a beginning. Elena's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of triumph, gratitude, and relief. She had carried through pain, isolation, and uncertainty, and now she held the tangible result of her courage and endurance. Adrian remained by her side, steady and supportive, never overbearing, never claiming credit. He encouraged her autonomy, allowing her to make every decision regarding her child and her future. From the nursery arrangements to the first photographs, Adrian's respect for her choices reinforced the sense of control Elena had fought so hard to regain. He was a partner, not a protector, and in that distinction, he provided the perfect balance of support and respect. Together, they shared quiet smiles and unspoken acknowledgement. This moment belonged to Elena, earned through her perseverance and determination. From a distance, Julian watched, though he did not approach. He felt an ache unlike any he had experienced before. For the first time, he understood that wealth, influence, and control meant nothing without integrity. The victories he had once celebrated, the laughter shared with Serena, the dominance he had wielded, all of it felt hollow in comparison to the life Elena had created and the legacy she had begun. She had transformed pain into purpose, betrayal into strength, and independence into a foundation for something enduring. Julian realized, too late, that power without honor is empty, and the only triumph that truly matters is the one built on resilience, dignity, and the courage to rise, even when the world tries to break you. Elena had done just that, and in doing so, she had begun a new legacy, one defined not by wealth or influence, but by strength, love, and unwavering self-respect. As the story draws to a close, the lessons of Julian and Elena's lives settle like dust after a storm. True power is not measured by wealth, status, or the ability to manipulate others. It is revealed in resilience, integrity, and the quiet strength that allows one to rise above cruelty and betrayal. Julian had believed that dominance, laughter, and control equaled victory, that a life built on manipulation and fear could withstand anything. Yet, in the face of Elena's unwavering dignity, his empire, reputation, and influence felt hollow. Laughter alone cannot sustain power, only character does. Elena's journey demonstrates that true victory is not about inflicting pain on those who wrong you, nor is it about public displays of triumph. Her strength lay in choosing peace over revenge, in protecting her child, and in reclaiming her autonomy with patience and resolve. She had endured isolation, heartbreak, and uncertainty, yet she emerged untouchable, not because she sought to punish, but because she cultivated an inner authority no one could take away. Silence, dignity, and deliberate action proved far more devastating to Julian than any confrontation or insult ever could. Adrian's presence reinforces the principle that respect and partnership, rather than control and dominance, amplify true power. Supporting rather than overshadowing, listening rather than dictating, he mirrored the qualities Elena had fought to embody herself. Together, they illustrated a vision of life where integrity, love, and collaboration create a lasting legacy, not fear or manipulation. The moral lingers. The strongest victories are often quiet. They are the ones built on resilience, compassion, and the courage to rise above bitterness. True power is not who laughs last, but who stands tall when silence speaks louder than pride, when dignity outweighs vengeance, and when inner strength transforms pain into purpose. Elena's story proves that the ultimate triumph is the one that cannot be shaken by wealth, betrayal, or circumstance, a victory rooted in self-respect, unwavering resolve, and the courage to create a life defined by truth and strength rather than by the shadows of those who tried to break you. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth.